Yeah, so I could tell you the target audience.
Mm-hmm.
My target audience is not fully converted Bitcoiners.
Okay.
My target audience is not hardcore libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
They already understand Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They get it. I mean, I'd love them to listen to the show and get something from it.
Yeah.
What we target is people who are new to Bitcoin or have been involved a little bit of time or heard about it, who perhaps thinks Bitcoin is, we're all a bunch of nutters, and we're trying to not scare them off.
Okay.
We're trying to say, hey, here's some ideas regarding Bitcoin you might not have considered. Here's some ideas regarding the state. Here's some ideas regarding money. Come and have a listen. And then hopefully they graduate and they go on to other podcasts.
Yeah. So what you want to do is say, okay, what for each episode you go, all right, I know what my target audience is. What do I want them to tweet? Right?
Yeah.
And for this particular one, we're going to talk about morality and stuff like that. At least for me, what I would want them to tweet is, wow, I didn't realize that Bitcoin is way more moral than fiat money.
Yeah.
That's a great tweet, right?
That is a good tweet.
That's something that is a huge endorsement of what you're able to bring out. Now you have a much better idea of, okay, what kind of questions am I going to ask to get them to tweet that?
That's a really... So you do that for all the books?
Yeah. And I want to do that for all my articles. Like this is the whole concept of beginning with the end in mind. And this is the process. For some reason, when you can place yourself at the end and look backwards, you're going to get a lot more insight onto what you need to do.
I think, Danny, we kind of already do this in that there are people who don't like the show because I'm not them. And they want me to be them and act like them and hold their same opinions. But we always felt like our job of the show is not to be them. And sometimes it's not to be us. It's to put ourselves in the shoes of the listener and say, how do we take you from
point A to point
A to B? And if you've got, you said identify someone. If you've got a accountant in London who's heard about Bitcoin, they're a little bit left and they think it's all used by right-wing nutters to get rich. We want them, if they ever come to the show, we want them to come to the show and go, actually, I didn't realize Bitcoin is used for human rights. Bitcoin is used for protection against monetary debasement. And those guys are kind of fair and, I might not agree with them and everything, but they're kind of fair and balanced. If we produce a show which is kind of like massively libertarian, fuck the government, crush the state, everything in the mainstream media is bullshit, they're immediately put off. An example today, I can give you an exact example today. Put out the show with Scott Horton. A very difficult person to fact check live because he comes with a wealth of information.
Yeah, I recorded with him last week. So
right, okay. So he's a guy, it's hard to challenge. You really just have to listen and say, I'm going to go back afterwards and review it. Some journalist who's got an infamy in the UK because he hates Bitcoin, he said, this is some kind of risk to do. Look at Ugly Game, Danny.
Okay.
At Ugly Game. He can get the tweet. But basically, he has used that interview to manipulate people against me and kind of draw an opinion of me. Have you found him?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up now.
Hold on. Yeah. But it's interesting.
This one.
Yeah. Let's look at this. So for people listening, this is at Ugly Game, a guy who hates everyone and everything. As an interesting, if inadvertent, illustration of how crypto and extreme politics can intersect, here's the perspective owner of a football club breaking from talking to Bitcoin to broadcast a 2-hour apology of Russian invasion of Ukraine. So my point with someone like him, he's part of the problem. Because firstly, it wasn't a 2-hour apologia. Scott was very clear that he is critical of Putin. He's critical of the invasion. But what he wanted to do is say, look, let's also look at US foreign policy and intervention and the history of that and things that have happened. Now, is Scott likely to be biased towards US against US state and to try and look at all the reasons they've provoked? Yes, that's where he's from. Nobody's perfect. But anyone with a brain can say, okay, I'm going to listen. Is there enough here for me to go and research and go and check it out? And hopefully they would. But this is the problem, is you've got people like this in the UK, they cannot handle free speech. They cannot handle the idea that someone out there has got a different opinion than them. So where you've got the people in the US who think I'm a fucking idiot on the left, these people think I'm an idiot on the right.
Well, there you go. That's that's kind of what happens, and especially on this issue, and with Scott's background and stuff like that. He was against the Iraq War from the beginning, and he told us all that it was going to be like a disaster.
He was right.
Where was this guy then, right? Like he's probably saying, oh, you know, like Bush and Blair are doing the right thing or something like that. You gotta understand, like this guy has a history, and like he's been right a lot more than you'd think, and it's worth listening to him instead of just dismissing him as a Putin puppet or something.
Well, so I have a history of jumping into opinions on certain subjects and then later on learning that there's a bigger picture I've not learned about, and it's a part I'm trying to develop and become better at. But for example, this one, you know that meme, I support the latest thing. That's even more relevant for Europe and the UK. There is less, I would say that, would you agree there's less critical thinking challenging the conception that this is just Putin being a psychopath?
I've not spent enough time in the UK recently to know.
I would just find it's a little bit more biased, just a little bit. So this is a guy who, like I probably did to begin with, when, oh, well, Putin's a psychopath and Russia's a dictatorship, therefore everything is defensible from Ukraine and everything is Russia's fault, and there's been no US policy or US foreign policy that's affected this, and jumped into it. And therefore, if I've got a guy on there who's saying, look at all this other stuff that's provoked them, he's going to struggle with that. The truth is there is a nuance in there where both sides are in the wrong. Ultimately, the war was started by Putin, so you can say that. But you can also say it wasn't helped by US foreign policy. But sometimes you have to pick a side. And I think this is a scenario where you just shouldn't be picking a side.
Let's hope so, because I don't think war is going to help anybody right now. The war is devastating and crazy, like in terms of the cost everywhere. So like to stay out of the war or to, you know, I think people are talking about a no-fly zone. There were people protesting outside like the Texas Capitol like the other day, and they were saying, you know, no-fly zone with the Ukraine flags and stuff like that. I'm like, are you crazy?
You fucking stupid.
Yeah. Do you really want to enforce a no-fly zone? You have any idea what that would mean and how much of an escalation that would mean? And all these people, like it's going to become a hot war real quick if that happens. And do you want a ground war in Russia? Really? That's what you want to do? Yeah, not a very good history there. You know, like you don't do ground wars in Russia without some significant consequences. So
yeah. Did you do it in person with Scott?
Yeah, I did, and he came to the studio at Bitcoin Commons, which is at Unchained, same floor as Unchained Capital. So yeah,
he's great.
Yeah, and I've had him on a couple times. And he's explained the entire Middle East imbroglio, and you know. I've read his book enough already. Great book, by the way. And you like everything leads back to sort of history, and he has a talent for linking a lot of it together, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, we had him on before during COVID discussing libertarianism, and because he wrote this article about how the big red button to just get rid of government is a bad idea, and it was really interesting to talk to him. We wanted to talk to him about liberty, but a war kicked off, and as he's works for antiwar.com, it felt like an opportunity to actually like listen to him. So we did it, man. But anyway, Jimmy.
Sorry, before you start, would you mind just putting the headphones on the floor, like behind the table, just so it looks a bit neater? Thank you.
Anyway, Jimmy, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, buddy.
Been I'd say a little while, but I'd usually get to see you every 4 to 6 months.
Well, we had this stupid COVID thing where like people didn't see each other for like 2 years. So I've seen you on and off, like just, hey, I'm at this conference. Let's like pass by each other for 5 seconds or whatever. Let's do bro hug, and then you're gone. But yeah, like to sit down and talk, we really haven't had a chance since, I don't know, like a year or two or something.
Last time I think we did in person was in a hotel room in Norway.
Yeah, Oslo Freedom Forum 2019. Yeah.
Was that the last time? Was the last time at the old Unchained office?
I don't think we did anything at the old Unchained.
We did.
We did.
We did. Killing the hopes and dreams of shitcoin bag holders.
Oh, I don't know if that was after. Yeah,
That's
so
after.
that must have been after. Yeah.
So you've done a couple more. How many books have you done now?
That's 4 books so far. Programming Bitcoin is the one that's not on the table, but you know, 2 of these are out of the pandemic. We got Thank God for Bitcoin and Bitcoin and the American Dream. So
I'm fascinated by Bitcoin and the American Dream. Bitcoin has become really intertwined now with US politics. And I know some people aren't fans of this. I actually kind of am. I would rather have regulatory protection than too much regulatory oversight. I think also regulatory protection in the US incentivizes the rest of the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you know, we're trying to influence. And really, this book is much more about sort of giving value to the people that we aimed it at. We aimed it specifically at politicians. And a lot of them just have no idea about Bitcoin. Right? They're like, what the hell is it? Wait. All these people are calling in about the infrastructure bill. We're kind of in a panic mode. They don't even know what we want, what we're about, or anything like that. So this book is aimed at them. And it's specifically so that they can get value out of it, whether or not they support Bitcoin. And, you know, we specifically have a chapter in there about the Bitcoin voter. It's not who you think it is. It's not a bunch of, you know, white, libertarian, you know, code bros or something like that are anarcho-capitalists. It's not, I mean, that's a small segment of it, but there's a lot of other people. You know, we point out in the book that on a per capita basis, Black people are more likely to own Bitcoin than white people, at least in the US. I don't know about London or whatever. But those are important things for these people to know. And they need to know these things so that they can make an informed decision. If they are going to oppose it, well, know that that's a significant part of the Black community that you're going to be alienating. If you're opposing it, that's a significant part of like US veterans, for example, that are into Bitcoin and so on. There are lots of voting blocks that are part of Bitcoin now that you really need to know about as a politician. And if you don't know about them, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Have you had any direct feedback from any politicians that have read it? Do you know if it's got in hands?
Well, it's fairly new. We've been handing it out like candy, but I mean, the few people that have read it, they like it. They're very appreciative, and you know, it's part of the 501c4 that CJ and Amanda and I are doing. CJ and Amanda were on with you about this book
in DC.
Yeah, in DC. So the idea is that this would give them some good info. And, you know, the way things in DC work is that you have to help them before they can help you, right?
Well, it's interesting because you've got the incumbent and then you've got the challengers. It seems like a lot of challengers running for Congress are now becoming Bitcoiners. And who knows whether they're using it as a hack. Eric Adams proved it was a hack and, you know, proved to be a little bit disingenuous perhaps or a bit uninformed. But there is we've got a lot right. What's that guy? Brian Solstice?
I can't remember his name.
I mean, he reached out. We've had so many reach out to us wanting to come on the show. And sadly, it's just no pretty much every time now because they want to make the same show and they want to use us as a platform. And it's like, if you've got nothing new and interesting to say, we're not interested. We will be having Josh Mandel on. We'll be challenging on some non-Bitcoin things. But there's a lot of them coming out now. That guy I mentioned,
I'm trying to find
you
him.
remember him?
I do. I know exactly who you mean.
He just tweeted out. Well, you can check it because Breaking Dennis Porter just retweeted him. But he's basically said, I'm running for Congress, and one of the platforms I'm running on is making Bitcoin legal tender. Whether or not that's important or not, the challenges to the incumbents, a lot of them are now saying they support Bitcoin, which is great if it gets us the protection.
Right. And they're seeing that it's a large constituency. And this wasn't something that we really realized would be the case, like, say, 6-7 years ago, because it was, okay, it's this tiny corner. They're going to need some industry representation. So, like, a lot of the organizations in DC, when they were formed, you know, like Coin Center, Blockchain Association and stuff like that, they thought they were, you know, representing these companies. There's no real, like, lobbying work for the actual voters, right? Like for the actual people that are into Bitcoin. And turns out that's a significant number. I think DCG released something that said it's like 23 million people in the US have some exposure to Bitcoin.
14%, I heard the other day.
Yeah, and those are big numbers. That's approaching AARP territory. They're one of the biggest lobbying organizations in DC. Like the numbers are starting to matter. So a lot of politicians are looking at this. One of the most interesting races that I'm watching this cycle is the Ohio Senate race. So the incumbent there is retiring, and you have 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats that are sort of like the top 5, right? Like you have many more people running.
There is Josh Mandel, right?
Yeah,
Morgan
Harper versus Josh Mandel, I think, on the Democrat side, and you got, I think, J.D. Vance and a couple of others on the Republican side, but all 5 of them are saying good things about Bitcoin.
Yeah, but it's how much they understand. So we had Morgan on the show. She was fine. She was lovely. But I saw her debate against Josh Mandel, and he crushed her. I mean, and he was great on that. And I am conscious because I've been mentioning Josh on the show a bunch of times, and a couple of people have written to me and say, yeah, you need to be aware of some of his other policies. And I think that's an important thing where we've got people claiming to be single issue voters. Let's be careful here. Let's also be aware of what these people stand for as well. I don't agree with just being a single issue voter. I understand why they might be, but let's not just rail people into being single issue voters. Let's just be aware these politicians might stand for other things, and they could rug pull us.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's your country.
The big thing is that it's like, what does it mean to be pro Bitcoin? Because you can say good things about Bitcoin, right? You can be like, oh yeah, I'm all for innovation, and I'm all for financial inclusion, and I'm all for self-sovereignty and all that. But what policies are they going to actually so we need, and this is one of the things that we're working on as that 501c4 is, okay, how are we going to measure success? Like if these people are for it, what policies are they also for? Because you can say good things about Bitcoin to get votes, but we have to be like, hey, like they're saying good things, but they're opposed to these pieces of legislation. This is where we have to kind of hold them accountable.
What's a 501c4? For the audience, I obviously know.
Yeah, so a 501c4 is an educational nonprofit, basically. Okay. And we can't endorse candidates specifically, but we can say stuff like, hey, like, here's what Bitcoin is. Here's, these candidates are supporting these bills or not. We can't like endorse anybody or anything like that. But that we're an education group, and we want to inform the voters about, hey, these people say they're all about Bitcoin, but here's what they're actually supporting. Or here, they're not on record as supporting like Lummis's bill, for example. That would be that to me is a nice way to separate the wheat from the chaff, right?
Is that the bill where there's no tax on purchase under $600?
There's a bunch of things within that bill,
right? Okay.
But a lot of it is around like sort of capital gains and whether or not you have to report it like above a certain amount. It's got a lot of good things, and Senator Lummis has been a champion of Bitcoin, and she's proven it with this bill. I want people on the campaign trail to say, I support Lummis's bill or I don't support Lummis's bill, because the minute you say like, and I want all the people that are listening to this that are into Bitcoin, I want them to go and ask them, at a campaign rally or something like that, hey, are you for Lummis's bill or not? Because like putting them on record on this sort of thing is very important. This is part of the political engagement, because they can blow sunshine up our butts all day long and say, oh, Bitcoin, 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 I'm pro Bitcoin. What does that actually mean? This is where having some policy angle or some policies that they're pro or against helps sort of like filter the wheat from the chaff, because every politician is going to say, I'm for everything. Oh, I'm for the teachers. I'm for the, this or for that or whatever. But it really comes down to policy. What are you actually voting for? What are you actually voting against?
All right. Well, we can use some of that. So, all right. And so, listen what we're going to talk about. Actually, Ben, you know Ben Prentice.
Yeah.
So, Ben's made an accusation against me. He says I'm getting a little bit shitcoiny. He said I am, because I've had Monero. I've mentioned Monero on the show twice recently, and I've mentioned it in scenarios. I said I can think of a certain couple of scenarios whereby I think I could justify using Monero instead of Bitcoin because I find Bitcoin privacy too hard. I know I'll screw it up, and I know with Monero I've got less chance of screwing it up. But what I'm not aware of is the trade-offs I'm making if I make that decision. And every time Monero gets mentioned on the show, like I'm always conscious of the responsibility of the show. When it gets mentioned and it comes up, what happens is a bunch of Monero people share the show out and they say, thank you for talking about Monero. And I don't want to promote something if I think there's some trade-offs I'm not thinking about. Now, I think there's a different trade-off as a transaction versus hodling. I'm pretty sure you could easily explain to me, oh, I shouldn't hodl Monero. But as a transactional level, if I was just buy some Monero, make this transaction, and then not own any, I think there's a different trade-off. But Ben wants me to ask you about this because he thinks I'm a shitcoiner.
Well, thank you for asking, because this is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while.
Okay.
And we did talk about it a little bit in like, crushing the hopes and dreams of shitcoiners or
shitcoin backholders.
Yeah. So here's my argument against why you shouldn't be using Monero as a transactional currency. First of all, the anonymity set in Monero is kind of tiny, right? Like the transactions are actually fairly large. So within a particular transaction block, you can't include that many transactions because you have these like zero knowledge proofs. Which are thousands of bytes and stuff like that. So that's been a thing in Monero for a while is, okay, you kind of have an idea who's doing what because there aren't that many transactions and you can sort of like by process of elimination get some info out of it. And you're only as good as the anonymity set you're hiding behind. It's not that big. It really isn't. The other thing is that Bitcoin has some really nice privacy properties, especially on the Lightning Network. So if you're able to pay for something using Lightning, you actually get really nice privacy properties. If you pay somebody that's far away from you on the network, and there are now routing algorithms that optimize for privacy rather than fees, right? Like, so you have fees on the Lightning Network. You can optimize on privacy as well, and it's going to be up to some of these wallets to implement that in certain cases. But you have very good privacy. If it's going through like 4 hops or something like that, nobody after the first hop really knows where it comes from.
Chain analysis can't do any work.
No, because it's not on chain. Okay. It's all, unless you're like listening and like intercepting all of these messages and put them all in a database and analyze them or something like that. There's no way for you to know.
But chain analysis, is it chain analysis? Chain analysis almost certainly, I would guess, within their company, have a Lightning division, and they're going, how do we figure this out so we can sell this data to governments?
Oh, well, and you don't think they're doing that for Monero or Zcash?
Oh, no, that's fine. But we're talking about the good privacy options in Lightning. Is there some way of building that database? Would there be some way of doing it?
I mean, there's always like a way to do that in any of these, including Monero, Zcash, or whatever, Grin, or whatever your favorite privacy coin might be. There's always ways to do that, and the one that they're going to concentrate on is the one that gets used the most. It doesn't mean that they necessarily know all that much. And in order to do it, it's way more costly. Right now, if you want to do on-chain analysis, you just download the blockchain, run some heuristics on it. You maybe have some data from external sources. You include that in order to figure out where it's pathing. But with Lightning, it's significantly more costly for them. And that's kind of what you want to do from a privacy perspective is the more costly it is for somebody to analyze, the better it is for you, because that's an economic calculation that's going to now come into play. If you make it very costly for them to figure out who you are, they're just not going to do it. So you had that with you. You're right. They're probably run a bunch of Lightning nodes and they're trying to intercept and figure things out or whatever. But you still have some pretty good privacy, and and at a certain level, if you pay I don't know, Pornhub or something like that, and you don't want anyone to
Why
know
is that
about.
your example?
Well, it's because they only take Bitcoin, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
You're the expert.
Well, I wrote an article about it in my newsletter, or I mentioned it because there was a paper written by some guy saying, okay, what's Pornhub's value to Bitcoin been because they stopped taking Visa, MasterCard. And so, now all these transactions are in Bitcoin so I have reason, not because I'm a fan of theirs or whatever, but that's something that you might want to be private.
You have a very valid reason to go investigate this.
Yeah. So if you're going from A to B, right, and you have enough hops in between, that's going to be a fairly private thing. Like very few people are going to be able to figure it out. And in addition, if you want to even do like an on-chain transaction, you can do something called submarine swaps, which I think are woefully underused at this point. But you can do that.
It sounds like the kind of thing that someone will be like, huh? What? Yeah.
So a submarine swap is a way to do like Lightning transactions on-chain or on-chain transactions on Lightning. So
is that Alex Bosworth did this?
Yeah. So and it's got some really nice privacy properties because there's no easy way to link the two of them, and you need to do a lot of observation. Again, you're upping the cost of somebody being able to sort of break that privacy, essentially. And that's really all you ever really want to do with respect to privacy. All privacy can be broken with enough data and enough listening or whatever. You want to make it so expensive that they're not incentivized to go and do all of those things. So, with submarine swaps, you can pay on Lightning and get a UTXO back that's unrelated to any UTXO that you inserted into the Lightning network. And you could do the reverse. You can pay in Lightning, and then the person on the other end uses a UTXO to pay your favorite vendor or something like that. That's really nice because there's no linkage between the two, and only the person that's providing it for you has that. So unless they're compromised with chain analysis or something like that, then you get a lot of these privacy properties. So you have so many options within the Lightning network where you really don't with Monero. You have this one particular zero knowledge proof with 5 different UTXOs that are chosen in a fairly deterministic way with some randomness embedded in it. And in general, like you get some amount of privacy in Monero with zero knowledge proofs, but it's not like it's impossible to break. There are several papers that talk about how there's only 5 possibilities. You can eliminate them one by one, and you're down to 3. That's a lot easier to analyze. It's not a very big anonymity set. With Lightning, it's however large the network is. It could have come from almost anywhere, and that's very useful to hide behind, and you get a lot of privacy properties that way.
Should they not just increase the size of the anonymity set, though?
The
Monero?
Yeah. Then you start running into chain bloat and stuff like that. Their
So it's fatally flawed?
Well, the thing is, like, the larger the anonymity set, you have to define it in your transaction. So if you have 5 transactions that you're doing it from, then that's 5 UTXOs that you have to reference. Or actually, Monero doesn't have UTXOs; it's all TXOs, and the chain keeps bloating, and you have no idea if anything's spent or not because that's the design. That's how you get privacy. So, I mean, if you increase from 5 to 20 or something like that, now your transactions are that much bigger and your proofs are that much bigger. And you have all, these ring signatures and stuff like that, which are bigger. And that means you can fit less of them on chain. That means you have an increase in anonymity here, but you have decrease in anonymity here. Because within a block, you can be like, okay, I can figure out what time roughly that person did a transaction. I just need to look at that block, and it's probably one of these. And there's so many ways in which there are trade-offs within Monero that aren't really solved that well. So yeah, I mean, I know all the Monero fanboys are probably going to come after me or whatever, but I'm telling you, it's not a very large anonymity set versus what you're going to be able to get in Lightning, which has literally thousands and thousands and thousands of nodes, and growing all the time. And especially for like the small transactions where you're gonna want that anonymity, Lightning is almost ideal because it leaves no blockchain footprint, which Monero does by default, and it has to in order for its property to work. I think Lightning is actually good, and I don't think and as it grows, I think that the privacy aspect of Lightning is going to be.
Does it get exponentially better as it grows?
Well, you have a larger anonymity set that you can hide behind. So if you have 10,000 nodes, right, then you're hiding in that group. And if you have 100,000 nodes, then you're hiding in that group. So it's like 10 times the anonymity set. That means 10 times the cost to figure out which one it is.
But is it exponential, the growth that comes with it?
I don't know if it's exponential. I think it's linear, if I'm not mistaken. But just in any anonymity set, it's proportional to the number of possibilities there are. In Monero, it's really not that much. Is my point. Whereas on Lightning, it's significantly more.
You happy, Danny?
That sounds good to me. Yeah.
All right. I want to get into my favorite subject to talk about with you, which is altcoins. The
Well, didn't we just do that? Come on.
We talked about Monero. I want to talk about alternative coins, shitcoins. And the reason I want to talk about it with you is our show is always growing, which means there's always new people coming in, which means I'm always getting new emails from people saying, I love the show, I love Bitcoin, but have you not considered ETH? What do you think of Solano? Is it Solano or Solano? I can't remember.
Solana.
You say Solano.
Yeah, Solano. Roberto Solano or Ethernet or Cardano people in the last week. And so I always think it's good to have a refresh on the importance of decentralization, that it isn't a spectrum, that for me, I always think it's what is it directionally? Is it becoming more decentralized or more centralized? If it's directionally becoming more decentralized, that's super important. And is it sufficiently decentralized? But you've covered this over and over. It's always good for a refresh. I love talking about it with you. So, Jimmy, is decentralization a spectrum?
No, it's not. It's a 1 or a 0. Okay. Look at the word decentralization. Okay. Does not have a center. If you have a center, it is centralized by definition, right? But it's in the word. So if it's centralized, that means that you can go and shut it down, right? And we're seeing two very good examples because of this Ukraine-Russia conflict. We have OpenSea and MetaMask that banned the Russian users, right? Completely banned them. And everyone in ETH was like, wait, how is it possible that they can do that? I thought this was a decentralized protocol. Well, it's because it's not decentralized. It's centralized, right? You have OpenSea, a company. You have MetaMask, a company. You have, all these other things that are companies. The thing about altcoins is that they are decentralized.
They both OpenSea banned users from coming on and using OpenSea just to buy NFTs.
Whatever it is. If you're from Russia, you can't go on OpenSea to buy, sell, or anything. If you're Russian, you cannot go on MetaMask to buy, sell, or anything.
Okay, so OpenSea, I've never used it.
I've never used it.
I'm assuming does it have KYC on it? Is that why?
I've not used it.
Yeah, maybe it has KYC, so it knows where you are. But MetaMask doesn't have KYC, does it?
No, neither of them do. But
so they do it by IP.
Yeah, well, or whatever it is. I'm not sure exactly what the mechanism is, but they're banning people. Do you understand the significance?
No, I understand the significance. So I'm wondering, okay, for example, when Coinbase banned 25,000, I'm stuck because my coins are in Coinbase's wallet, which is centralized, and therefore they can stop me moving out. I used MetaMask once, like 4 years ago. I don't fully understand what it is. It's a company, so is it just a wallet?
Basically it's a centralized sort of wallet.
So once they've banned me, can I not move my coins out of MetaMask somewhere else?
I mean, there might be ways or something like that, but as far as I can understand, no, you can't. Well, if you're part of Russia or something like that.
Why couldn't you just restore your wallet with someone else and do it?
I'm not sure exactly how it works, so it's hard for me to answer that question.
Yeah.
But I mean, the key thing here is that they banned users right? And you can't do that unless you're a centralized platform. No one can ban Russians from using Bitcoin, right? That's part
Well,
of
depending on what you're using your Bitcoin on. So, for example,
well, if you wanted to just do a transaction, right, move it from one cold wallet to another or something like that, no one can stop you.
if I had a Ledger wallet, could Ledger ban people doing it because Ledger has a node for you to do transactions?
No, Ledger can't, because the way they work is that it's a cold wallet, and once it's signed it, then you can broadcast that transaction pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
So like you running your own node or whatever, and ideally that's how you do it. Is you're running your own node and you have some connection.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
But not everyone's going to do that. So we had it Wasabi yesterday, which upset a few people, but they've blocked certain people.
They're a centralized service, so that is possible. But you know,
but what I'm saying is, I not to pick up. Well, I have to, because that's the job. But it's like, what's the difference between what Wasabi did and MetaMask did?
Well, what Wasabi is a voluntary service that's like getting into it. MetaMask is part of the Ethereum proper, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, OpenSea is like, and that's pretty much the place for NFTs, right? Like that's...
Oh yeah, I forget OpenSea. I don't care about that. I can't see a difference between Wasabi and MetaMask. I mean, I know we should be encouraging people to hold their private keys. Can you hold your private keys with Wasabi and restore to another wallet?
Yeah. And you can with MetaMask as well, I think.
You can. Okay. I just don't see a difference between the two. That's my problem.
Between MetaMask
and Wasabi, they both had the same policy.
Well, Wasabi is just the CoinJoin thing. MetaMask is the entire wallet, right? Like you can still run a Wasabi wallet because it doesn't depend on anything central. For a CoinJoin, it's a small sliver of what a Wasabi does. You know, you manage your stuff or whatever. MetaMask, it's the entire service is unavailable to Russia.
I guess what people need to do is be aware of the aspects within a Bitcoin ecosystem which are centralized.
Yeah, like an exchange or whatever. Yeah. And those can and do, ban people for whatever reason. But the thing is, like, if it's decentralized, then you have control. If it's centralized, somebody else is in the middle. And that's the key here is... self-sovereignty requires decentralization. And you can have bilateral trade instead of having some third party in the middle that approves or disapproves. And that is the key. So, all of these things that are supposedly decentralized or whatever, and this was the point I was getting to, is that they're all decentralized in name only, all these altcoins, right? They claim decentralization. And the reason why they do it, and this is in my article this week on Bitcoin Tech Talk, my newsletter, the reason why they do that is so that the regulators won't come after them. Because, there are tons of regulations around scams about like pyramid schemes and all these other things. But by claiming decentralization, that they have no center... Hey, you guys shouldn't come after us because we're decentralized. But what MetaMask and OpenSea are doing, like what that's showing is that actually you are centralized and we can regulate you. And I think it's only a matter of time before that happens to Ethereum, that happens to Cardano. It's already happened to Ripple, right? The SEC is already going after
I thought Ethereum kind of got away with it. They're like, yeah.
Well, so
it started centralized and became decentralized.
That they're getting away at the moment. Yeah. But the thing is, regulators aren't buying this lie anymore that they're decentralized when it's clearly centralized. So at that point, it's just, okay, once the pressure builds up enough, they're going to be saying, okay, Ethereum, you need to do this, this, and this. So say this Russia conflict gets to be especially big, or say we get in the U.S. and the UK get involved or something like that. Say it becomes a bigger thing and we need to ban Russian accounts from every possible service that they can think of, and it becomes a bigger thing. At that point, the US government will be able to say to Ethereum, especially if some of their Bitcoin, Ethereum Foundation members are in the U.S. or something like that, and say, "Hey, you need to go ban Russian users from Ethereum because we're getting reports that they are using Ethereum to transfer value out in and out and trade, go around our sanctions or something like that." At that point, they would be subject to that regulation, and it would be clear as day that they are centralized. You can't do that with Bitcoin. No matter, like, they can try, and they'll certainly tell all the exchanges, don't let them do it. But if there's a person in the U.S., like a relative or something like that, and they're transferring, there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do to prevent that.
What could they threaten the Ethereum Foundation people with? Like
Jail time?
What do they want them to do?
So no transactions out of Russia, something like that.
And how would they stop that? They would have to make code changes to Ethereum?
No. So this kind of happened with the Poly network. I don't know if you remember that hack. So there was a hack about, I don't know, I want to say 7 months ago or something like that. And the Poly network, their smart contract was flawed.
I remember, yeah.
So it was like $700 million or something like that, right? And basically, what if you look at their Twitter, and maybe you can even pull that up, they said, "Dear hacker, like, we have instructed everybody to not mine anything from this address or this address or this address on both Binance Chain and Ethereum, and you are not going to get any of your coins. If you hand them back, then, like, why don't we negotiate, basically?" And the hacker, which is really word for like smart contract lawyer, he settled for, I think it was $500,000. So one way to look at it is, it's nominally worth $600 million, settled for $500,000. So 99.9% of the value of that was in getting the central controller's permission, which in this case was the developers of the Poly network.
Damn.
Right? 99.9%. So most of it is centrally controlled. And they paid the $500,000, called them a white hat hacker, whatever, and, forgave, I guess, whatever consternation that this guy caused on the network. But that's what they would probably do, is say, okay, every miner, if you mine this, we're going to reject your block and we're going to go do something. And they have that power because, Infura is like what everybody uses for the block explorer. So if Infura doesn't follow, whatever proof of work thing was found by a particular miner, no one else is going to. That's the main one. Like, no one else cares about any other node. It's whatever Infura says. So if you can, like, it's very centralized, right? Like, you can sort of, if they could do that for the Poly network, they can certainly do that because the U.S. government demands it.
It's frustrating where a project claims to be decentralized as well as claiming to be better money than Bitcoin. That's the ultimate frustration, because the power of Bitcoin is in its decentralization. So if you're claiming, one, you're better money and you're decentralized, you're arguing to people, you're making the case that you should own this coin over that coin. That does annoy me. What about a scenario? And bear in mind, I caveat this with, I've got no interest in shitcoins. Don't own any. Don't intend to train any. I don't promote any. But I am also interested in, like, fair discussion. What if one was like, for Solana, for example, said, you know what? We're not decentralized. We admit it. We are permissionless, and we're happy to be regulated. And we are just a different alternative platform that you can build business applications on. And we have a token, but we accept we're not decentralized. We're not trying to compete with Bitcoin. Would you still consider that a shitcoin and argue against it? Or would you just consider that just a platform?
Well, if they issued their own token, then there are certain things that you have to consider,
of course,
based on that, which is that they would be running afoul of all kinds of laws that exist already. Like, you can't make your own currency, right? Liberty Gold, I think, was one, and there were several others where they issued their own coin based on gold, right? Like some digital form of gold, and all those people went to jail. So I would think that if they ever admitted something like that, all those people that did Solana should go to jail.
Really?
Yeah, because you're issuing your own currency that's centralized and able to be like, I mean, maybe they get away with it because like they have enough lobbying power or whatever.
Do we want them to go to jail?
Well, I don't want them want anyone to go to jail, but that's probably what would happen if they did.
But what I'm saying is like I'm trying to offer or consider the alternative argument, because I can advise people against the value of these things, but Bitcoin's got so big now. It has already won the race. I wonder if there's an alienation by overly criticizing every single project that ever exists. Would it be better to say, do you know what? Don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good project. I wouldn't put my money in there, but hey, you should consider Bitcoin. You know, because these aren't going away. We've had years and years of these projects being created. Are we putting our energy in the best place?
Well, I mean, depends. Whenever people ask me about my opinion, I'm going to tell them, hey, I think it's a scam, because I think that's an accurate way to describe what these things are. It's a way for VCs to get rich. Most of them who buy insane amounts of pre-mined tokens at an extreme discount, pump the hell out of it, and then release it to the public and win money that way for their LPs or whatever. I think that's immoral. I think that's horribly bad for everybody. So I
agree on immoral. Yeah. I'm not sure scam. I agree on immoral.
Well, I think it's really immoral. If you did that with like stamps or something, that would be a Ponzi scheme. That's exactly what that guy Ponzi did. And there are pyramid schemes that are very similar or whatever. I think by any reasonable definition, that's exactly what you're doing. You're pumping up something that has no intrinsic value for the sake of profiting yourself. I think that's a scam. So, I mean, like you might say, well, we should be nicer to them or like not talk about them as badly because we're putting our energy in the wrong place. I try not to think about altcoins. It's just that a lot of people ask. And if they're going to ask, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think. And you asked, I'm delivering. That's what I'm doing.
Hey, I'm eking out the answer for the listeners. What I say doesn't matter. It's what the listeners take from this. And a number of people listen to the show have written in and said, thank you so much. I'm Bitcoin only. I've learned a lot about this. It's funny. That takes us really to this because I do want to ask about this. For me, thank God for Bitcoin is the moral case for Bitcoin. And interesting, sorry, Danny, we were with Jeff Booth the other day and we were talking about money misinformation, how you have Bitcoin, which is money truth, and the rest of the market is money misinformation. It's a completely distorted market. People can't prepare for, their wealth gets destroyed. And that really is, whether we say thank God for Bitcoin or the moral case for Bitcoin, I'm not religious, I think it's the same point, right? Yeah,
I mean, the case for Bitcoin from a moral perspective is that you are not stealing from other people. That's really it. And, you know, we wrote that book to Christians, which we know there's a significant number, to help them understand from a Christian perspective why it's a better money than fiat money and how immoral fiat money is. And to your point, like all these altcoins as well. And that's the case that we're making. And, you know, you talked about with Jeff and many other people. It's that you get all these skews because essentially value is being stolen from all of these other people. And, you know, as we point out in the book, it's not just stolen from, you know, rich fat cats or something like that. It's not like that at all. In fact, it's being stolen from the poorest of the poor in the entire world. If you think about the US dollar, you know, every time they print an additional dollar, it dilutes everybody else that's holding the dollar. Well, if you look at cash, for example, the US dollars, the actual physical bills, 65% of physical US dollar bills are outside the United States. Now, where are they? In all sorts of countries for very good reason. They don't like, a lot of people don't like holding their local currency. So that's their form of savings. When the US dollar is expanding, and in the last 2 years, it went from 15 trillion to 22 trillion. So that's a significant increase, almost 50% increase in the amount of M2 money that exists. That's a significant inflation. Well, who is that hurting? Your PPP loans, your STIMI checks, where's that coming from? It's coming on the backs of all those people that are outside the United States. that are getting their dollars diluted. And, I've talked to Yeonmi Park about this. In North Korea, the most desirable...
She's amazing.
Yeah, the most desirable currency in the black markets in North Korea is the US dollar. That's what they save their money in. Who are you hurting? When the dollar expands, it's them, right? It's the poorest of the poor. It's the most vulnerable people in the most oppressive places, whether it's North Korea or Zimbabwe or Venezuela.
It was when I was there in Venezuela, people wanted dollars.
Yeah. And those are the people that are being diluted. And we, my friend Alex Gladstein, he's been on your show too.
Yeah, that's
great.
great.
He talks about how, he sent me a thing because he knows I'm interested in North Korea. So report out of North Korea, like from the defectors or people that are still in there, talking about how like prices in North Korea just doubled, right? That's what happens when you expand the dollar. It is highly immoral. These are people that are getting hurt all the time so that we could get our stimmy checks, so that we could have our PPP loans, so that we could have, all these things that Congress spends money on and, feeds rent seekers essentially. Those other people that we don't see, those are the people that are being hurt. And that's the case that we're making in that book.
And it's not that I agree with this, but why does the US government owe a responsibility for people who choose to hold the dollar in another country? Is it because they've created the dollar global standard as a reserve currency? Is that why?
Yeah, and they more or less imposed it on the world as part of Bretton Woods, right? Post-World War II, or like towards the end of it, it was a bunch of bureaucrats from a lot of countries that decided, all right, we need a new monetary world order. Those are the exact words that they used. In a hotel in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods, and they decided this is how it's going to be for the rest of the world. And because the US was the most dominant power with most of the gold, they were able to impose it on the rest of the world. So it is in a very real sense a monetary imperialism that's been cast over the entire world. And that's why, the U.S. is responsible because they imposed it. And, previous reserve currencies had a similar sort of like dynamic, including your home country with the British pound before that. So, I would say that the U.S. government is responsible for all of this global trade happening in the U.S. dollar because they more or less imposed it.
So give me the moral case for Bitcoin then.
Well, the moral case for Bitcoin is that you don't have the cesspool of theft, corruption, and cronyism that you do with the U.S. dollar, right? The fiat money is just straight up evil. It is an institution of corruption, of theft, of extracting value from people that could least afford it. And Bitcoin is one that's way fairer, right? And that's the case that we make. And we don't even mention Bitcoin until like the last two chapters. It's, okay, here's all the things that are wrong with fiat money. All of these things are the result of fiat money, including, high time preference behavior, the politicization of absolutely everything. When you have a money printer available, everyone wants access to that money printer. And it is all about, hey, I want, they will fight tooth and nail for that money printer. So everything becomes politicized. All of these societal ills are a result of fiat money. And then we bring in Bitcoin and say, okay, here is why Bitcoin is very different. There is no center. There is no central controller. That means that you have certainty around the amount of Bitcoin that you have. It's not going to get stolen from you. It is unseizable money, and it's undilutable money. And that means that you have actual control of it. And that gives it much better qualities from a moral perspective, because if a money is hard to steal, then that's just better money. Dollar is very easy to steal, not like physically from your pocket or something like that, although there is that too. But from diluting it, you are actually stealing value from people, even if you're not taking the dollars out of their pocket. With Bitcoin, you can't do that. And that makes it a more moral money, or a system that makes it very, very difficult to be immoral in.
Is there ever a moral case to dilute money in times of crisis, times of economic crisis? At the moment, we've been talking about this in the moment in the UK, we've got a huge energy crisis. People cannot afford the energy bills. and the Scottish government is going to be issuing rebates on or on energy bills, so people can afford to heat their home. And in that scenario, perhaps they're running the money printer, they're diluting to do it in times of recession. If we had a period or a responsible government that ran both surplus and deficit and tried to balance the economy, would there ever be a moral case for the money printer?
Well, so I personally think no. And there was a French bishop by the name of Nicolas Oresme from 13th century who made this case way back then, which is, okay, is there ever a time that the prince can debase the money, right? This was with metals and stuff like that. And his conclusion was no. He might as well take my code and say he has need of it. It is literally taking your stuff away. And if you're not doing so voluntarily, that is just theft straight up. Now, can there be justification for theft? You know, this is what Les Miserables is about. It's like, okay, my family is starving, so is it okay for me to steal bread and so on? That's a much deeper and more philosophical question. At least in my view, it is morally wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right, ever. Okay. So I don't think that argument necessarily works.
What about a scenario where, I'm trying to come up with my toughest questions for you, Jimmy. What about in a scenario where an exchange has inside information and can counter trade the market, ends up dumping the price of Bitcoin, destroying someone's purchasing power? Is that immoral?
I would think, well, so they're dumping it for what reason? For their own benefit?
Well, yeah, because they can counter trade the market and end up, wiping out accounts and attaining that Bitcoin?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure what the moral implications are.
Because dilution of money destroys the purchasing power.
Yeah.
And if you had enough Bitcoin that you could trade the market to, you had a way of opening a large short, crashing the price, yada, yada, and acquiring Bitcoin, you are also destroying purchasing power.
Yeah, I don't think that would be immoral per se. So that would be like if I held a lot of Beanie Babies for some, and you I know you're a Beanie Baby collector, and I want to crash the price, so I sell all my Beanie Babies. Well, I'm doing what I want with my own stuff. I'm not necessarily stealing from you. It's just I'm ahead of the market in some way, shape, or form. That's not immoral because I'm not taking anything away from you. Now, it may have negative consequences for you, but that's the risk you took when you bought Beanie Babies. So in that sense, I don't think like causing somebody else's property to go down in value is, unless I'm like actively damaging it. If I cut up your Beanie Babies, that would mean that I would be, harming your property. That would be immoral. But if I'm doing something with my own property that I have the right to do, and it happens to hurt you, that's not my problem. That's the risk that you kind of took in making in taking some of that.
Well, I think I'm gonna have to dig into this.
I hope so.
I'm gonna have a read of this, but I'm gonna be in for Bitcoin and the American Dream first. Just to close out, Jimmy, you've been in Bitcoin for quite a while now. Do you remember your first year?
2011.
Yeah, I thought you told me that before. We're 11 years in from that now, which is incredible. How do you take it all in? Because for me, there's been a lot of change in 5 years and certainly 8 years. But for you, 11 years, like how do you just take this all in? Because you've been along for the whole ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unreal to me. Like, I'm a coder. Right, I'm a programmer. I've been a programmer geek for most of my life. I started coding when I was like 9 years old. Right, that's what I've been, and I'm coming on podcasts with you. I'm writing books. I'm like helping the alumnus office like craft their legislation. I'm going to Oslo Human Rights, forum to talk to human rights people about how they can, better do. Like, it's unreal to me that I am in this position. I'm getting invited to Christian conferences to talk about Bitcoin because they're like, what you're saying about money is something that nobody really talks about. So we want you to like. It's completely surreal to me that I'm in this position now. When I was a coder, coming back to 11 years. That's the transformation that I've gone through, and I'm sure you feel similarly, because you have, I think, as remarkable or even more of a remarkable story in becoming like sort of like a top podcaster in Bitcoin. But that for me, the changes in the industry are just that they're changes, and things are happening. In some sense, they're inevitable. In others, it's just sort of like people working on it. But for me, the way I take it in is just one of gratitude, because I'm able to have multiple streams of income and spend a lot more time with my kids and work on something that I'm very passionate about, and working to bring the world to a place that's better than it was before. I mean, like I think I've talked to a bunch of Bitcoiners, and all of them say the same thing about the past 2 years is, if I didn't have Bitcoin, I'd be so depressed right now.
Well, I mean, I don't know what I would be doing.
Right? And I know a lot of people that didn't have Bitcoin, and they are depressed because the world lacks hope. And this is something that Michael Saylor says is,
gives you hope.
Bitcoin is hope. You need some bright light, and it gives you some sense of things getting better, and Bitcoin is making things better. So for me, I have nothing but gratitude towards what Bitcoin's been able to do, and I take it in with a sense of wonder and joy and gratitude more than anything else.
Yeah, I can fully appreciate it, but that lens is super interesting actually, because I think every Bitcoiner can see all the crazy shit in the world. This last 2 years right now, what's happening to money, but we have that lens of hope. It's like, okay, it's not just that lens where it's like, oh, I have money that protects my wealth, but also, oh, people can actually do something. You can create something that is outside of government control, which is outside of all the bullshit of politics. You can actually create something and fix part of the systems. And we also can see the use cases, how people are using this to help people and help their other lives. There is that. And I'm with you. If you didn't have that lens, all the people who don't understand Bitcoin, refuse to look at it, refuse to check it out, don't have that lens. All they can see is like misery and high gas prices, and they don't have that. And I look through that lens and think it's not going to be pretty, but at least we have this, right? We have this tool we can defer to that can just help. And no, I fully appreciate that, and I appreciate you, man.
Well, thanks for having me on. But yeah, it's such a surreal thing, isn't it? Like, like, how are we doing this, Peter? How are we?
We turned up.
Yeah, and it's like we're now in the Bitcoin space doing this and that. Like, is this real life? What timeline are we living in? How did this happen? Those are the questions.
I think we just turned up, and we had Dylan and Claire here earlier, and he's part of that new cohort of people who just turned up. I mean, he's 20 years old. He's smart as shit, and I don't know how much energy I'll have to do this. I don't imagine I'll be doing this in 10 years. I think I'll be too tired and hopefully
you're
relaxed.
Probably like driving a Lambo and doing something, but yeah. And watching your team win the Premier League, hopefully. Yeah,
I mean, the second one's a bit more unrealistic, but we're going to try for both. But just seeing this new cohort of people come through, I mean, that's brilliant as well, is that there are people recognizing this and turning up and doing it. I think I feel like a pompous dickhead saying you just turned up, but people just did turn up. We've sat in rooms 4 or 5 times and done this, and other people are doing it.
Well, I think you're giving yourself too little credit, because you worked hard and I worked hard, and we didn't just turn up. We turned up. We showed up and we worked hard, and that's how you really.
But there are a lot of people out there who work hard who maybe don't get to do that. I mean, I always remember. I used to have this web design business, and this is one of the things that stuck in my mind more than anything. We went to Stoke, and there's a place they do pottery, and it's a factory, and there's people there who work in that place for 40 years, doing the same job day in day out. They work hard. They work hard, and it's a different life.
Well, it's a different kind of working hard,
but it's still for them. In some ways, they work harder. in a more, in a different type of job. But I think a lot of people work hard. I just feel very fortunate and very lucky to, have met you early on and been able to do this. And I appreciate everything you're doing, Jimmy. So I'm sure we're going to do this a bunch more times over the next few years and talk about Bitcoin and stuff. All right. Pimp these books. Tell people where to go, where to find you. People check these books, especially this.
Yeah, so I have 4 books to my name: Programming Bitcoin, The Little Bitcoin Book, Thank God for Bitcoin, Bitcoin and the American Dream. They're all available on Amazon. You can also go to my website, programmingbitcoin.com, which is the title of the first book. And there are links to go buy all of them. It's available on Amazon all over the world in English. Some of these in different languages. I think the Little Bitcoin Book is translated to 15 or 16 languages at this point, including Farsi and Hindi and stuff like that. So Thank God for Bitcoin has been translated to like 2 or 3, and we'll see what happens with Bitcoin and the American Dream.
Yeah, you might have to do Bitcoin and the British Dream, Bitcoin and the Spanish Dream, Bitcoin and
I don't know. Those don't have sort of like that vision that people have of the American.
We all want the American Dream. We all want to go to Disney.
But anyway, they're all available on my website, on Amazon, and you can follow me at Jimmy Song on Twitter.
Keep crushing, man. Good to see you, and good luck with all of this.
Thanks, man.